Hello and welcome. All of us, in some way or the other, have been impacted by this deadly virus. Whether it's a family member or a friend or a neighbor, we've become accustomed to these losses. Hearing about deaths, it seems, has become commonplace. In these dystopian, surreal times, the people who are going out every day, putting themselves at risk, giving us hope every day, every minute, these are our healthcare workers, our nurses, our doctors.
We at Vakra Swag will keep bringing you these incredible life saviors from all across India. Today we have with us Dr. Kunal Sarkar, one of the most well-known, one of the most well-respected doctors in Kolkata. Dr. Sarkar, thank you for your service and thank you for sparing the time to speak with us today.
Before we start talking to Dr. Sarkar, I also want to tell our viewers that if there is someone, a great doctor that you want us to speak to, someone you feel is doing an incredible job, but his or her stories are not being told, please get in touch with us. You can get in touch with us on Twitter. Jyotsna is at Jyotsna Mohan, and I am Manika Raikwar, which is at Manika Raikwar. You can DM us, you can tweet us, and we will respond to your messages and try and get as many of these incredible heroes and their voices to you.
And you can also leave a message on our YouTube channel, Vakra Swag, and please do subscribe to us. We're trying to bring you as many stories, as many unheard stories from across the country as we can today.
So, Dr. Sarkar, I know you're very busy, so we'll start straight away.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you so much for your service. I really want you to know that West Bengal is seeing all-time high numbers. Firstly, how are you, and what is the situation really on the ground in Kolkata?
It's a bit of a mixed feeling. I think there is a little bit of a sleeping soldier in all of us, who feels a little bit stirred up when maybe a little bit late in our life, the call comes to get out of the barracks and onto the battlefields. That's a part of the field, that you do feel a little bit stirred up. Because I come from a lineage, my father spent at the age of 15, he spent 2.5 years in a jail in Bengal, fighting it out in Chittagong. So I used to feel at times that in that perspective, our lives have been largely wasted. But anyway, it's a bit of a stirring feeling to be addressing this kind of utter despondent situation in healthcare. But then there is a part of us which really tells us that we rather not see it in the way we have at this point of time. And the other part that sinks into us very soon is a feeling of helplessness. Because we are able to do a little bit. The X number of patients we have in the hospitals and ward, we are running up and down. Our entire team, entire retinue of people is doing their job. But once it assumes these proportions, where it has truly overwhelmed capacity, wherever we are in the midst of a mediocre Kolkata right now. But look at what's happening to Delhi with its 8,000 hospitals, and Mumbai, which number-wise, it's if you just had a look at it, you would have thought, look, by our standards, Mumbai should have been able to put up a bigger fight. But we have been dwarfed, we've been dwarfed by the wave.
Dr. Sarkar, as you were mentioning, many things are just receding into the background right now. I think not just for you doctors, I think even for common people like us, in the thought process eventually just leads to one way. But, the sense now when it comes to West Bengal is that it's going to be the next epicenter, especially, now that the reality is going to pour out after the 8 phase elections and what really went on. Is that a sense you're getting there as well?
Ma'am, you see, first of all, I think by and large, the people of this part of the world, in the beginning, we were feeling a bit pampered. I think ever since the British left, we've never felt this pampered in our lives, right? So that is the last pampering the average Bengali has. And after a long time, we suddenly found ourselves, because the occasional starlet from Mumbai used to come to the city and talk about Rasgulla and Mishti Doi and rounded accents. And that is all the gratification the Bengali was left with. Now suddenly we find ourselves in all this territorial campaign. We suddenly find ourselves thrust in the national limelight. We were quite well settled in our complacent mediocrity. But we really paid a heavy price for it this time. And there is simply no way. I think by and large, you don't really have to be a doctor, you don't have to be a journalist, you don't have to be a kind of an educated elitist. By and large, people feel completely betrayed by what's happened. And then again, it's been a long drawn out protest with the election commission as well. I mean, that has gone by. You cannot mitigate this disaster anymore. We've lost that. We've lost that chance. So at least you can put a little bit of balm on the raw misery that people are going through.
You used very strong words, Dr. Sarkar. You've said there's helplessness, that you feel betrayed, let down. Just speak to us about, let's say, an average day at a hospital. What is the situation? Describe that for our viewers. The number of patients. What is the situation in terms of oxygen, medicines? How is, let's say, Kolkata, the city you live in, coping?
Look, I'll give you, once again, you almost feel guilty, reciting statistics right now. I don't think any one of us are naive enough to believe all these government figures that come out at the end. Even if you did, let's presume you do believe that in the very beginning. So what have we, when people start kind of sort of coloring numbers and putting it out to their own convenience, after some time even they lose out on the trick of the trade. Now we are showing, as we speak, we are showing a couple of things. We are showing, number one, some 16,000, 17,000 cases every day, whatever it says. Now presume that we have got for a population of 10 crores. We are just a shade behind of Maharashtra in terms of population. But mind you, we are 3 times Maharashtra in terms of population density. 3 times. Out of all the 15 major states of India, we are the most densely packed state. We are like a can of sardines there. So we are that densely populated. So in this setting, we have a lack of active cases. Say it's a lakh. It may be 10 lakhs, it may be 20 lakhs. I'm just going by the government numbers. So at the height of this pandemic, with a lack of active cases, how much would you think that how many COVID beds would the healthcare system require to fight with it? Just at the face value, at the ipsi facto level, you would need about 20 to 25,000. How many, for some inexplicable reason, how many has the government given so far in sheer generosity? About 10,000. Why? I do not know. As far as the published inventory is concerned, how many beds do we have in our state? Mind you, we have one of the most favorable population to bed ratios of India. One of the best. Right? We are the only major state which has more government hospital beds than private hospital beds. That's thanks to the communists. That's a different matter. Now, how many beds do we have in this state? 1,30,000. So out of 1,30,000, we've only committed 10,000. I think perhaps last evening it's gone up to 12,000. When as per our declared figures, if we only looked at our own figures with a little bit of attention, we have a straightforward mismatch. And even how many people are really dying, people are giving a life and a limb for an oxygenated. So how many oxygenated beds have we committed? about 1,800. How many high dependency critical care beds do we claim to have in the state? About 9,000. So you see, the question remains at this stage that what are we saving ourselves for? What are we saving ourselves for? And this has been the story of COVID in many Indian states many times around. I really haven't had the time to look through and review the stats this time, but during the first installment, I could not identify a single Indian major state which had ever committed more than 50% of its beds to fighting COVID at the height of the problem, which was the middle 2 weeks of September.
And
So you see that there is a lot of contradiction. So we've imposed the scarcity on people, and the misery is endless.
we're only just talking about, I think, pretty much, we're not going into the rural areas now, which I think is, of course, the big concern that, the numbers are drastically increasing in the rural areas, and that this is really going to further overwhelm the healthcare, facilities across the state. Are you getting a sense again here on what is really going on in the rural areas of West Bengal?
Of course we are. Of course we are. And one of the reasons why we are so bitter against this this whole monkey business of elections was what it has done. What has it actually done is, if you allow the sort of natural course of this problem, it always starts up in the urban concentrated areas first, and then it finds its way, it creeps and crawls its way into the districts, depending upon the traffic, the density, etc., etc. But thanks to this business, where we had all the high and mighty from Delhi, every part of the country, our own home manufactured leaders, everybody crisscrossed the state, and not only they did it, but each one of them was accompanied with road shows and rallies and all these absurdities. So what we did is, in no time, we managed to uniformly infect the whole state. So time for time, on a kind of, if you did a time-lapse photography or whatever you call it of West Bengal, last time around, it took a reasonable period of time for this problem to peter out, to find its way out into the districts. But this time, I think we have some 26, 27 districts, something like that. I think 3/4 of them are on fire. So the north of the state, the central Bengal, South Bengal obviously being probably the most densest part of the world in terms of population density. So we managed to, as you correctly said, we managed to spread it across the whole state. And,
not only, no, and not only, is it sort of spreading everywhere. In West Bengal, now there is talk of a new variant that a lot of reports are saying may affect vaccine efficacy.
Well, I think we do have the fear at the back of our minds. But if we look at the clinical behavior, we really, as you would understand, I don't think any clinical outfit in the country has now either the peace of mind or the time to structurally collect data and publish experiences in papers. But now and then, even in our moments of desperation, we do have frequent conversations with people, say in Mumbai, in Delhi, in Pune, in Nashik, who had a meeting a few weeks before we had. The clinical behavior, to cut a long story short, has not been entirely different. Right? And overall, if we took a kind of a drone view of what's happening in the population around us, if we consider the people who had been vaccinated, we vaccinated so-so, not fantastically. I think Bengal has just crossed a crore, which is about 10% of its population. We are near about a crore. We may not have hit it. It's totally stopped. We're not going to have any vaccination between first to the fifth. Anyway, so the question is, in terms of clinical behavior, it's not been very bizarre compared. We have seen bizarre behavior in the second wave, all India-wise anyway. younger people are getting affected. The severe disease is coming much earlier on. Children are being affected. So it has not so far. So we think that predominantly it is behaving like the strain which is out of Mumbai. Mumbai is the double variant strain, B1 1.617, which has two variants. The Calcutta one, everybody has been very politically fashionable to change parties in Kolkata. So I think anybody who comes to Kolkata tries to change parties. So the virus trying to do a trick on us. But the clinical behavior-wise, it's not behaved very differently. And overall, you see, we can't really substantiate it with very structured data. But overall, otherwise, you see, touch wood, we shouldn't say it too early. Considering the blast we have received, if it hadn't, you see, healthcare would have been flattened by this time. It would have been like a firing squad. All these youngsters, the young nurses and doctors who are really out in the, as you call, the raw front line. We are the pseudo front line. We are the people who are doing the organization, ideation. It is the young fellows, the young girls, the young boys who are fighting it out. I fear for them. But so far, it's not been a month. I don't consider we have covered the first month yet. We are about 6 weeks behind Maharashtra. So we are a little bit more than a month, because I was talking to a friend in Mumbai and Pune. They say that they consider the 8th or 10th of February to be their sort of take-off date for disaster. For us, I think the take-off date would be a little 5 to 6 weeks after.
Dr. Sarkar, you also mentioned about the young people who've been taken into the grip in the second wave, and I want to just bring a little bit focus there. We've just heard, we've heard of this news anchor who's passed away with heart attack, and he had COVID. And it's not the only case that I've heard amongst the young people. I've heard many instances where people who've recovered and they've thought they've recovered. Some weeks down the line, they've had a cardiac arrest and passed away. So I want you to just tell us a little bit about the post-COVID recovery. I think a lot of people really need to know what they should be looking out for, any signs later on, or when can they resume absolutely normal life?
It's very good thinking there, Jyotsna. I think if we put it, you see, this COVID fellow is so mischievous. It doesn't even allow us to have uniform thinking over a 6-month period. That, the goalposts keep changing and we keep changing along with it. So it's a funny game. Now, in briefly, you see, if you consider the crore-odd people who got infected the first time, and I'm sure of all the positive people, about more than half of them would have been symptomatic and taken some suffering in some form or the other. Many of them, you see, did go on to have sort of lingering symptoms like body ache, stiffness, etc. We got very anxious about many of them few of them having cardiac problems. But thankfully, if you compare our data, which is never very strong, but from the first installment, if we compare, say, the Indian experience with what came out of Europe or parts of North America, we certainly did see some cardiac problems, that viral suddenly somebody who's had a pretty normally functioning heart pre-COVID, a reasonably young person, post-COVID, they would almost behave as if they are in serious heart failure. The heart has become weak, etc. It's called viral myocarditis. And on steroids, etc., there are other types of viral myocarditis which get well sooner. But this fellow takes almost 2 to 3 months to resolve. But touch wood, more often than not, it does resolve. And we have learned by this time. You see, the main problem, the core problem with COVID, unlike having a bacterial pneumonia, is not like having an organ, the lung or something getting inflamed or infected. The main problem comes from the microclots. COVID interacts in a very mischievous kind of way with the blood cells. And why do the lungs end up getting completely shattered. It is not, it is very different. The process is very different, say from the classical pneumonia we know before. So this is more like the air sacs of the lungs, the thin blood vessels, the fine blood vessels, the capillaries, which are crisscrossing the lungs for the air exchange. So more than the lung tissue getting damaged, it is all the blood vessels, etc., which gets clogged up first. So this abnormal clotting response is one of the fundamental mischief-making process of COVID. And this can be a little bit long drawn for people who manifest other problems before. A lot of young women, you see, not after COVID. You may have picked up in the press people getting very alarmed with the vaccine, especially the Covishield. And we don't know, we haven't really separated the details yet. But it happened in young women. They were getting cerebral thrombosis out of the blue because the young ones were vaccinated before, not the people in the United Kingdom. When they went to vaccinate 50 plus, it's considered to be young age group for them. So many of them came down with the cerebral. So this is the inherent problem with COVID. I have operated on 2 people who blocked their stents after vaccination. One after vaccination, one after COVID. So these kind of outlying and bizarre happens even, but the long drawn out problems really are with a little bit of joint pains, body ache, business, and the lung side. Because lungs are the central focus of all the problems. So there are people who had a lot of severe lung disease. Because we, in our hospital, you see, we have the Asia's largest ECMO unit. ECMO is people who would have otherwise died in 24 hours. Even ventilators can't keep them alive. So we put them on this artificial oxygenation outside the body with a machine called an ECMO. I don't think anybody in the country has had ever experience of running more than 5 ECMO treatments at one time. This afternoon, we just put our 25th patient running. Right. So it's like a total battlefield out there.
It sounds like a battlefield. It sounds like.
Oh, yes.
I actually wanted to go back to something you said a little while ago, where you said that we are going to hit our peak probably in a month's time. So are you expecting numbers like Maharashtra in a month's time? And do you think the state is getting ready to prepare for it? Do you think that the government will be ready for it? Or is it again going to be a situation where everyone's running pillar to post?
No, I think it's a very cruel thing to say at this stage. But the question is, once you've been run over, you've been run over. So whether you've been run over by 1 lorry or 2 lorries, that's immaterial. So once you've been run over once, bad luck. So today it's like, we are like a 5-foot tall individual who are staring at, say, currently the wave is probably 50 feet and we are 5 feet in height. So I don't think anybody is even pretending to address or reach out to every people. The government honestly seems a lot less energetic than they did last time. Now, what is going to happen? What as I said, the reason I keep on almost seeing Maharashtra in my dreams is, I have a lot of very good friends in Maharashtra, is simply because if these numbers, this infection prevalence by any way translates into any kind of numbers in Bengal, oh God, I hate it. Because look, today we are at, if you just took like for like, today we are at 17,000 and we are like totally running around like headless chickens. So what would happen when we came to 25,000? I can't even think that. Forget about 50,000, 45, 50, 60. So, I really, it is a pertinent thought, but at 17,000, at 17,000 government published infections per day for a state of 9.5 crore population, for for a heroic population density, we are really struggling. So even by government standards, if this climbs up to 25, God save us.
You know, Dr. Sarkar, last week I was speaking to a doctor in Delhi, and he was saying that, you know, at the end of it, I feel like there are not going to be any doctors who are left standing. You know, I'm taking this personally with you. Are there days where you just literally want to give up?
No, and honestly, you know, this is. I don't think. You see, if you gave up, you know, if you first of all, you have to be stupid and a little bit addicted to doing something irrational. That is why we are doctors. You know, anybody with a little half a neuron working this day and age wouldn't even pretend to be a doctor. Can you imagine somebody who's a glutton for punishment, has gone through some 12 years, 14 years of slogging like this, n number of exams, millions of MCQs. At the end of the day, you come to all this business. So I think, you know, there is a little bit of a irrational, not a little bit, there are quite a few irrational genes programmed in our systems. The society has given up on us. Our wives get disgusted with what we do. But at the end of the day, people have come to a kind of accepting the bizarre. You know, we are all very bizarre people at the end.
But
I don't think, I don't, honestly, I tell you, you take the example of, say, I'm talking to a friend of mine in Mumbai. You know, we had, when a formal webinar ended and when the science got over, this is exactly what we were discussing. We were discussing. And I tell you, you know, a little drop of satisfaction we keep with us. There were quite a few young chaps over there, young girls over there. Not one of them.
But my heart goes out to these young ones, Dr. Sarkar, the residents, the newly minted doctors. It's literally been baptism by fire for them, you know.
Oh yes, you know. You see, we are trying to do our level best to look after them. You really have to look after them. And you see, the other thing, which I think is very important over here, because not everything is emotional. What I also fear for is, you hit a very right note over there. That some of them are so young and so raw. You know, there are some poor chap, I was speaking to a girl the other day who's just passed out, and many of them who are just waiting because all their exam schedules and things have been hit for a 6. So many of them who are floating around indeterminate, they are also being pushed into service. And these young boys and girls, they really haven't even had a decent exposure doing a ward or, you know, as you normally would, your proper experience and getting to know the SOPs, etc. So slam bam, they are in the battlefield straight away. But they're clever people, I think. You know, they're at least 30% cleverer than we were. And they're coping pretty well, but we do have to look after them. We have to give them the confidence because it will be a life's learning for them. But we do have to give them the confidence and a little bit of whatever rote knowledge we carry ourselves that has to be properly transmitted, that has to be properly communicated. But hats off to them. I think, you know,
hats off to, I think, all the doctors, all the nurses, I think everyone in the healthcare community, who's doing such a good job, really putting your lives at risk to save everyone else's. Before we go, one last question. If there was one thing that you could say to governments, to people who in administrations, to just make that one change, what would that be?
I think if we had the Aladdin's lamp in hand, we wanted one wish. We would really want a sensible, robust vaccination program to kick in. Right? There is no point in pandering here and there. You know, this is the tool we have with us. We can see it for ourselves. It's working well. It's working jolly well. We are absolutely disgusted and dismayed that the government has made such a mess of the program. But whatever, fair enough, what's done is done. We'll have a lot of time in hand to discuss all the post-mortems. But whether we require, look, it's not happening from 1st of May. I don't think it's happening in Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, anywhere. We are told it's going to happen from the 5th. Whenever it happens, please pick up the pieces. Please get your acts together. We've got to hit the runway running, and we've got to get the vaccination up. And if there was a part B to the wish, that is, stop sending this contradictory messaging to people. There is no point, good people of society, the media and the doctors crying themselves hoarse and telling people to do all these right things, whilst the first sort of defaulters of COVID-specific behavior is the highest people in society. I think that cuts a very, very sorry figure. So I really think, please leave your political baggage and whatever rivalry you have behind you. We need to get, what is very important is that we just were threatened. We are threatened with a fragmented vaccination program. The center working one way, state working one way, retail going another way. So please, the people, the desperate people, the dying people, the suffering people, today, their essential need is you get your act together, whether it is for free, whether it is for $1,000, whether it is for $999. If the middle class is used to buying 30 rupees petrol for 105 rupees, the middle class can probably pay. Look after the weaker sections of society as well in the way you can. And a robust, quick vaccination program is the only and a sure shot way out of this misery that we have. I think the civil society has to, we have to place our demands for that. Straight away.
You've said what every other doctor, Dr. Sarkar, has been telling us, to hit that runway running, as you just said. A robust vaccination is the only way for us to get out of this abyss that we are in right now. I mean, across the board, I think every doctor has understood the miss. And of course, what you said, the dual messaging that is going on, that is completely conflicting. But to everybody listening in to this, please, as soon as it is possible, as soon as the vaccinations come, please do get vaccinated. That is the only way for our country to really come out of this. Listen to our doctors.
Thank you, Dr. Sarkar, for joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and be well and keep safe. Be well and keep safe.